Many people asked Ramana Maharshi about suffering. Bhagavan's usual response was to suggest that the seeker discover who it is that suffers, just as he invited those plagued by doubts to discover who it is that doubts for the real self is beyond suffering and doubt. In doing so, they would realize that the one who suffers and the one who doubts is merely the ego. Occasionally, Bhagavan also pointed out that whatever makes a person dissatisfied with their life of ignorance and compels them to seek the real self is ultimately beneficial, and this often happens through suffering. Bhagavan once said, "If there were no suffering, how would the desire for happiness arise? And if that desire did not arise, how would the search for the real self begin?" Sometimes, however, the questions were impersonal, referring not to a specific tragedy, but to the universal problem of suffering and evil in the world. These questions were often posed by visitors unfamiliar with the doctrine of non-duality or the path of self-inquiry. On one occasion, a visitor asked Bhagavan, "Global problems like hunger and disease devastate the world. What is the cause of this?" Bhagavan replied, "To whom does all this appear? You are not aware of the world and its sufferings while you sleep, but you are aware of them now, while you are awake. Remain in the state where these things do not affect you. When you are not aware of the world, that is, when you remain as the real self in the state of deep sleep, its sufferings do not affect you. Therefore, turn inward and seek the real self. By doing this, the world and all its miseries will come to an end." The visitor responded, "But isn't that selfish?" Bhagavan replied, "The world does not exist outside of you. Because you mistakenly identify with the body, you see the world as external to yourself, and then its sufferings appear. But the world and its sufferings are not real. Seek the reality and free yourself from this false perception." Still presuming the reality of the world, the visitor continued, "There are great men and public servants who cannot solve the problem of suffering in the world, even though they work toward it. Why don't Mahatmas help?" Initially, Bhagavan replied at the visitor's level of understanding, "How do you know they don't help? The silence of the Mahatmas is far more powerful than making speeches, engaging in external activities, or offering material aid. Mahatmas help more than anyone else." Bhagavan then explained further, "The world and ignorance exist only because of our illusion. If the objective reality of the world is an illusion, then the evil that exists in it is also an illusion. The remedy is to turn the mind inward, toward the reality of the self. Our essential nature is happiness, but we forget the real self and imagine that the body or the mind is the self. All suffering arises due to this false notion, I am the body. This false identification is deeply rooted and has grown strong through lifetimes of reinforcement. It must disappear for your essential nature, which is happiness, to be revealed. The cause of your unhappiness does not lie in external circumstances. It lies within you. It is the ego. All misery and suffering come from the ego. It is the root of all your problems. What is the use of blaming life events for your unhappiness when the real cause is within you? If you are free from suffering, then there will be no suffering anywhere. The problem is that you see the world as something external to you and think there is suffering in it. But both the world and suffering are within you. First, see yourself, and then see the world as a manifestation of the real self. You are not asked to close your eyes to the world, but to first see yourself, and then see the entire world as a manifestation of the real self. If you consider yourself a body, the world appears external. But if you live as the real self, the world appears as the manifest Brahman. Brahman is reality, and reality is that which is beyond all pairs of opposites. Pleasure and pain are only aspects of the mind. Good and evil are relative terms. For good and evil to be known, there must be a subject. That subject is the ego, the I that perceives and remembers. Where does it come from? Find out. Perception, memory, and all other experiences always arise for this I. You do not have these experiences during sleep, yet you exist while you sleep, just as you exist now. This shows that the real self remains, while other things come and go. You came from the same source where you dwelled during sleep. Upon waking, the ego arises, and then thoughts simultaneously appear. The arising of thought is the root of all evil. Discover where thoughts arise from, and you will remain in the innermost and all-pervading self, free from the concept of birth and the fear of death. The pure self is reality, the absolute being, consciousness, bliss. When the real self is forgotten, all miseries arise. When the real self is firmly held, miseries cannot affect you. All you need to do is abandon your identification with the body and relinquish all thoughts about external things. That is, things that are not the real self. No matter how much the mind externalizes towards sense objects, withdraw it and fix it on the self. This is the only effort you need to make. If you follow the path of your thoughts, you will be carried away by them and find yourself in an endless maze. Turn inward and discover where the thoughts arise. For every thought, the base or source is the I thought. Find out who has these thoughts. If you turn inward and inquire into the source of the I will fade away. All you need to do is find the source of the I. This is the inquiry of wisdom, Jnana Vichara. The bliss of the real self has always been yours, and you will find it if you seek it sincerely. Discover, who am I? The matrix is complex, but each of us holds a part of the solution. Drop your thoughts in the comments, and together we'll see beyond appearances.